Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Sushan.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are staying in America's finest city. We are discussing television news, broadcast journalism, and what it's like working on a morning news program. Our guest is Stephen Luke. He attended San Diego State from 1995 through 1999. He has won a whole lot of Emmys, 15 Emmys, count them, and we appreciate him coming on this show. Steve, you just finished with this morning's show, and welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I appreciate the invite.
All right. So I was just thinking about this because you just finished your morning show. I come from the world of sports where a game ends and the coaches, the athletes, they have post-game interviews. There's radio and TV programs and writers who break down what they did right and what they did wrong. Do you and your colleagues sit around and go, okay, let's kind of break down and do our own post-game show of how this morning's show went?
Yeah, we do. For sure. I think it's a combo of looking back on what went right and what went wrong for the show that you just did, and then also kind of planning ahead for the next show. Because in the world of morning news, believe it or not, like I'm one of the lucky ones getting to sleep in till 3 a.m. But our producers who are putting the show together from scratch are showing up between 11 and 11:30 at night. And so when our show ends at 7, they're kind of ready to get out of here. So it's the tail end of their day. But yeah, we'll go around, we'll talk about things with the show, and it's usually 10 minutes or so, and then we're out of here.
All right. So what were you most proud about from today's show, or what would you look back on and this is what the people calling in to Extra Sports are going to be complaining about from today's show?
You know what? Today's show was pretty smooth. I mean, there's a lot going on that's pretty heavy in the world right now in the world of news. We've got, even though we're a local news station and we are hyper local with the stories we cover, there's a fair amount of what's going on over in the Middle East with the war between Israel and Hamas. And so that's always in there. There's usually a few other stories that, tend to be maybe a little heavy or not. And so what I enjoy about the mornings is, we got to give you that. We want to get you out the door with kind of everything that's happening right now. But also, like when we have those moments, usually in the toss to weather or whatever it may be, just having something that we can laugh about, And so I think this morning we laughed about, what did we laugh about? We talked about the candy corn, because Marianne likes that and nobody else does. And so that took us off on a tangent. And that I think at one point we got caught up on National Bologna Day because that's today. And that took us down a rabbit hole that had our producer trying to say rap in our ears, as so excited talking about bologna on the way into weather. But it's that kind of stuff that hopefully can make people smile a little bit in the morning, because let's face it, like people are going on with their lives and they're getting ready, and the kids out the door can be stressful. So you need some of that.
All right, let's rewind. Let's talk about coming to San Diego State. You are from the Bay Area. You chose San Diego State. Were you someone who went on a lot of different college tours? Did you just thumb through old catalogs, or tell us the process of how this Northern California kid ended up at Montezuma Mesa?
Oh my gosh. Well, I thank goodness, because I've got kids that are in the college kind of age right now. I've got a daughter who's a junior and a son who's a senior in high school. And then my youngest is a freshman in high school. And what kids have to go through these days with college is so intense. And as a parent, and, the GPAs that they have, and they're still not getting into these California schools. And so it's kind of crazy. I kind of floated by in high school a little bit. And thankfully back then, San Diego State wasn't as hard to get into as it is today. Students make me look a lot smarter now with the GPAs that are coming in. I don't know how it was for you. But no, I think it was between San Francisco State, Long Beach State, San Diego State. I played football in high school, and there was a chance that I was going to get to like walk on or play. They didn't really offer scholarships at San Francisco State, and went over and visited there. And that was kind of intriguing. And then the program went away because they had to I think that was right around the time where a lot of football programs were going away to try and make it even between male and female athletes on campuses. And so that made it easy because I was like, I don't want to go to San Francisco to school. I want to go down to San Diego, and loved the atmosphere, loved the weather. I had an uncle at the time who was working at the Old Globe, and he was living down here. And so there was just a lot of things that lined up, and really just loved the university when I came for a visit.
Yeah, I remember myself somewhat similar in terms of grades. I don't want to admit what my GPA or what my SAT score was, but I never toured the campus. And then I signed up and did everything. I'm coming. I remember the first time I went on campus was with my dad, and it was a parent teacher kind of like orientation. And I remember looking around the San Diego State campus and just looking at the beautiful buildings, which is even more beautiful now. And I remember just going, oh my goodness, this is where I'm going to go to school. Like, this is my life now. I had never stepped foot on the campus until I'd already agreed to everything. And then I was blown away that this is now my life.
Oh man, you lucked out. Yeah, no, I mean, that's like sight unseen, but you know what? I mean, the pictures do it a little bit of justice. And then when you get out and, especially coming from Northern California, there's like the smells that are down in San Diego, and the warm days that just, I don't know. For me, spring at San Diego State University is the best time of the year, where it's not super hot yet, but it's kind of sunny, it's warming up. Those were like the best days.
Okay, so when you step foot on San Diego State's campus, what are your goals at the time? What do you think you're going to do with your life? What are the types of classes that you're initially taking in case that these are some of the things you might do with your life?
I was being 18 years old. I was obviously kind of still trying to figure some stuff out, but I was pretty dialed into like what my talents and interests were. And so it was a question of whether I was going to go TV, radio, or film. And so that sort of pushed me in one direction at the university. And it was through a series of events on campus at SDSU where I landed with TV news.
So let's get into some of those events, especially an internship at NBC in San Diego. Tell us the process of finding out about it and how you get this internship at NBC.
Yeah, well, I mean, first that you're just trying to do anything. As I'm sure you can remember in college, it's like, anything remotely in the field you want to say yes to. I ran teleprompter over at KPBS, which was one of my first kind of TV jobs. And I remember I was so nervous when they were doing the telethon and they went live. And I was like, I'm controlling this thing that they are having to say. If I screw up, my hands were shaking as I was doing it. I don't think I've been that nervous in TV news ever as an on-air person. But I did a little of that. I went over and looked at the radio station. What was it called at San Diego State?
ACR.
Yeah, and so I ducked in there, kind of watched someone do their thing. That was actually formative in me. I don't want to offend anyone, but just for me, it was like not for me. Like I went in there, it was too confined. It felt too one-dimensional for what I wanted. So I was like, okay, we can cross radio off the list. That's not my deal. And then went and was filming football practices for San Diego State, just to get behind a camera and get something on the resume. And so that was cool. And then it's like everything else, it's through connections. And my mom growing up was working for the Oakland A's up in the Bay Area. And she became good friends with the wife of the pitching coach, a lady named Terry Cluck. And Bob Cluck is a San Diego baseball guy. A lot of people know who he is. He went to San Diego State University and has had a career in the bigs. And they're the best. And Terry and Bob are really good friends with Jim Laslovic. And so as we were coming down, they were able to hook me up with Laz when I finally got to the point my junior year or whatever it is where you can get that internship and get the course through SDSU. And he got me in the door at NBC 7. It was KNSD. We went by the call. It's still KNSD, but that's how people knew us then, was 739 actually, is I think the old timers would remember that. And so went and got an internship at the old pen factory, which was in Kearney Mesa. Pen factory turned newsroom, and I walked in and I was sold. I was like, this is what I want to do. I love the energy in this newsroom, and let's make this happen.
When I think back on the TV classes that I took at San Diego State, I know that I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed trying to write my words to this video, but I know that the part that I struggled with was just what I use, to film something and getting into the editing, the weeds of it. And that's something where I felt like some insecurity and some struggles. What were some of the skills that you picked up on right away, or some of the skills that you struggled with right away when it comes to how you put together these packages for TV news?
Yeah, it would have served me a lot better to be a journalism major at San Diego State had I known that was the path out of the gates as a freshman. But since I didn't know if it was going to be TV, film, or radio, I ended up as I don't even know if the major is still there anymore, but it was a communications degree with an emphasis in telecom and film. And I recall it was kind of like an appetizer sampler degree where we were doing a little bit of everything. It was like advertising, PR. I took a audio splicing class at SDSU. I think that must have been the last year they were doing it, because it was dated at that time, but it was interesting, right? And so, I think for me, it was more the journalism, the writing part of it. I think I had kind of a natural creativity that allowed me to take some risks and do some things. And I had seen as an intern at NBC reporters who I watched what they did. I was like, I like that. I think that's how people do it. You see people who are doing it and you go, I like what she does, or I like what he does, or I'm not a huge fan of that. And then you kind of find your own voice and your own way.
So you mentioned Jim Laslovic. He worked in the sports department. You had played football yourself. Tell us about, you got this huge sports background. Tell us about the decision to pursue news and not sports.
Yeah, well, my first TV job on air was in Bakersfield, California. And so I had interned at NBC here in San Diego. I had gotten a job out of an intern editing, which was huge because I was able to kind of, editing's where it all comes together. And so that's where you get to see all these different voices and talents and reporters put together their pieces and how they did it. So that was fantastic. And so I was kind of a hybrid role in Bakersfield where I did sports and news there. And I wanted sports to do as much sports as I could, because it just didn't seem as stressful and as, I don't know, it was more fun, I guess, than the news. But the more and more I got through it, it was kind of like, I'm just this average white guy who didn't play professional sports. I'm, not necessarily the best looking guy. You see some of these guys on TV, you got these guys, former professional quarterback. I think at the time also, this was, 20 plus years ago, more and more women were finding their way into sports. And I think the people who were hiring wanted women. And so I'm like, you know what? I think my chances are better in news. Plus, in a local news department, you've got 2, maybe 3 sports personalities, and then you've got a bunch of news reporters. And so I wanted to get out of Bakersfield, even though it was a great city with wonderful people. It was like, this is a stepping stone. And so I thought my best chance was telling stories through TV news on the reporting side.
Tell us about getting the job in Bakersfield. Websites back then, was it posted? Did you pay for the subscriptions that tell you about these TV jobs? Did you have an agent right away? How did you get the first one in Bakersfield?
I lucked into it so much. I had a friend at San Diego State University who had been through the communications department, and she had gotten a job reporting in Bakersfield and kind of knew I was getting my tape together and wanting to do something. And she said, hey, you should apply for this job. And so I got in touch with the news director, and it was the same day, same weekend that a high school buddy of mine was getting married in Bakersfield. So I went up and did my first interview and then went to the wedding. It's kind of fun.
By any chance, do you remember what was on your initial tape that you were showing to these program directors way back in the day? Like what type of stories, what they were?
Yeah, for sure. I remember a couple of them and they weren't your own stories because you weren't a reporter yet. So you would have to take the raw video that a reporter who was at the station was using, and then, put your own package together yourself. And I did not want to see what they had done on TV first, because I was too, I guess, afraid that I just copy it, or their voice would be dominant in mine. I just wanted to be authentic and real, like, hey, this is my work kind of a thing. I wanted to be able to tell a news director that. So there was one story about a reunion at an airport, kind of one of those stories where somebody had long lost family member thing. I'd put that on there. I had done a story with a guy named Scott Walker, who was a reporter for NBC back in the day, ended up going to ESPN and Golf Channel for a while. Great guy. And he had done a story on autograph hunters at a local golf event. And so I'd put that together. There was a couple other ones probably in there as well. And then what I did too is there was a photographer that was one of the most talented photographers. And I said, hey, would you do me a huge favor and can we go out for 2 hours? I'm going to have a list of places, and I just need to shoot my stand-ups to do the kind of montage at the top of the tape where you've got yourself doing little, talking here or there. And so we knocked those out, and I think I got them like a $50 gift certificate to Carl Strauss or something like that as a thank you, and put the tape together, and that's what I had.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up that last example, because, even in my own life now, I've been working in broadcasting for almost 2 decades, but I'll go out to games that I know I'm not broadcasting live. It's not going anywhere. I call it a mock broadcast. I just want to practice. And I think that whether you've been in this industry 20 plus years or whether you're a student, not everything you put on a demo reel is something that actually aired. It's called a demo reel because it's a demonstration of what you can do. Mm-hmm. And so maybe share a little bit more for our current students to kind of wrap their heads around going around to different places and what you did and what they can do to help them get that job by just practicing something that never ends up on the air.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that someone had said, hey, when you're in the car driving, just talk and describe what you're seeing around you. Act as if it's a breaking news story. And I think just being able to talk on your feet and describe what's happening in a way that makes sense is a skill that broadcast journalism majors can try and practice on. Most of the things you're going to be doing are common sense type stuff in this world, like, how you talk to people, how you gather facts and all of that. But when you're in it, sometimes, it starts moving real fast, and so, I mean, we hear that in sports analogies where the people that have been doing it a long time, it just kind of slows down and, like this, and this. And so I think that's one of the fun things to practice when you're practicing your craft, is almost thinking about the end product before you're doing it, to kind of know what images you're going to need for it. Like, why am I shooting this? What questions I'm going to ask? Because there's nothing worse than a 50-minute interview that you're gathering sound bites from, when you've got a max minute 30 on TV for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into your time at Bakersfield. You're there and you're happy to have this job, but you have bigger aspirations. What were some of the biggest skills that you learned and things that really developed you into this more established, confident news reporter that helped you get back to San Diego?
Yeah, I think it's just practice. I mean, I think it's like anything else. You just have to put in the time, and you have to fail. And I failed a ton. I remember one story going out and you shoot your own stuff. I mean, more and more people do that now in big markets just because of the culture of how things work now. But back then, it was like pretty much just the smaller markets where you would be an MMJ or a one-man band or whatever some of these terms are that you use to describe somebody who shoots, writes, and edits and reports all on their own. And I'd gone out to this far off, it's like agriculture is huge in Bakersfield. And so I want to say it was like out in one of these neighboring communities. And I was talking to some farmer or something like that and did this whole interview and got back and realized I had never hit record on the camera. And it was like, and you got a deadline, it's like, and I was like feeling good about it. And like, all right, well, I need to. So I think I may have called him and said, hey, I just have a couple extra questions. They're really important. Can I circle back? Because I didn't want to tell him that I forgot to hit record on the camera. Like, what an idiot. And so, just like stuff like that. Like, all right, well, probably not going to not hit record anymore. You're going to remember to do that. So let's start with the basics. And it's just all that little stuff from there and kind of stay in the course. And I don't know. I mean, it's been a fun journey for sure.
As you told that story, I've checked to see if I pressed record about 7 times, I think, just to make sure that, right? Because I have definitely done the same thing. In fact, there's times that I've recorded an interview and then I've come back and I pressed delete before I finished editing, and now it's gone. And now I have to put my head between my tail and go back to the subject and say, yeah, I just have a couple more questions, but it's going to sound like we're doing this exact same thing all over again.
Totally.
Yes. When you sit down to write a story, I'm curious, kind of the practical thing here. Do you sit down and think, I have this video and I'm going to type these words to match this video? Or do you say, these words really matter, I'm going to type up these words, and then hopefully there's video that I have that matches these words?
Well, your photographers that you're working with are going to love you when your words match the video, because there's nothing worse on that end than going like, we shot all this stuff. What are you talking about? I mean, sometimes the facts of a story are so important, obviously, that you have to talk about it. But I always think there's a way to start off the sentence. As students enter into Hepner Hall at San Diego State University, they're worried about, this topic or whatever it might be. If that topic is something that's hard to, put images with, at least that, like, as the viewer, it's not distracting. You know what I mean? Like you can get, and so usually it's that kind of stuff if I don't have the video to match exactly what's going on. But no, I'm a huge proponent of the images matter. I mean, in TV, that's what we have. I mean, we're not, if we just forget about all the images and just want to use words, then might as well write for a newspaper. And so you have to make that an important part of it. And you have to make the sound, and I mean, that's just as powerful, and the emotion. And so, if I'm doing an interview with someone, and this is maybe something that I did right out of the gates, but I'm for sure think about it now. If I'm doing an interview where somebody is talking about something and their voice cracks and they take 2 seconds to compose themselves and then they just shake their head like that, that is a way better soundbite than the 12-second eloquent soundbite of them, saying what you want them to say because of the emotion, right?
That's a great point. I love that. And I'm wondering how your interviewing style has developed over the years. Like, what were you like initially, and what are some of the things that you do now when you're interviewing people, whether it's on set or whether it's out in the field, in order to get those powerful moments on film?
Yeah, I mean, preparedness goes a long way, and it takes work. I mean, it's like, I can tell, like you did your homework, and you're probably sure the last thing you want to do is like, let's figure out what Steve Luke did, whatever, here and there. But, you've made the conversation better by having a little bit of information coming into this. And so I think it always starts with just being prepared going in. And then I think, it's obviously listening to what the person is saying, not being so hung up on the next question that you're going to ask them is huge for sure. I think asking the open-ended questions so that, a lot of times people will ask the question and like the answer is in the question, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Or it's like an obvious, like, well, no duh, like, what do you think this person is going to say to that question? Honestly, some of the hardest interviews to do, and you would know this better than I, are with sports, because athletes are coming off the field. They're if half the time they're pissed off because they lost, and you don't want to make them more mad, and so it's that the really good ones. I don't quite know sometimes how they do it, but like the really good ones ask the question in just the right way where they can get just enough of the info and the emotion at the same time.
I remember the first time that I was inside a courtroom and watching the lawyers ask questions and with witnesses. And I remember thinking about, okay, I've never seen this before in real life. All I know is what I've seen on television. And the number of times, objection, leading the witness. And I know that I've thought about that now as a reporter in terms of leading the witness or leading. And it's really easy to do that because most people don't even realize that you're leading them, But I think that in order to truly get what people think, I think it's important to not lead the witness. And so I'm going to try not to lead you into this next question. As I say, that just the balance that you must take as a journalist to make sure that you're not so locked in on this is my story and this is my thesis. I'm just trying to get you to say these words for my story.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fine balance because, you talk about it at a morning meeting and it's kind of like, well, this is the story. And so you need people to stay on point, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that. And sometimes people they get nervous or they don't know what you want to hear and so there is that balance. I'll be honest with you. I've had stories before, and I wouldn't recommend doing this on a regular basis, where I knew it was going to be so tight that I wrote the story before I went. Mm-hmm. And I knew it wasn't locked in stone. It could change. But sometimes it worked out, and I didn't know what they were going to say, but it was like, oh, soundbite here, soundbite here, soundbite here. That was the fastest story I've ever done. Now, again, that's not a great practice to go about, but when it's needed, you can certainly do that. But on the flip side, yeah, just allowing stories to develop. I did a story, and it wasn't a hard-hitting story. It was a New Year's Day story several years ago. It's one of my favorites I've ever done. There's this street over in Point Loma, and it's called the Scott Street Parade. It's a street right along San Diego Bay. And every New Year's Day, they have a New Year's parade with the neighborhood. But what makes this parade different is no one's allowed to watch. All of the neighbors participate. And so it's this really random thing where they all gather, and there's a ton of them, and they gather at the top of the cul-de-sac, and then they come down and they wave. Like, people are like, it's the greatest thing. And it's just this idea that, life is meant to be lived, in the action, not from the sidelines. And so that's a great story, right? Like, that was the thesis or whatever going in. And as I got there, I found out that there was a woman who lives on that street, lived in a home, and was dying from cancer. And then during the parade, they all sort of diverted and were going through her yard, and she was at the window, and they were like waving and it was towards the end. So it was like this hello and goodbye all at the same time. And it was the sweetest thing. And I can't imagine that story without that happening. But I was just lucky enough to see it happening, to recognize that it was happening, and to be like, okay, this is the climax of the story. Like, this is what it's all about right here. Not so much this other thing. And so I think there's lots of those little things in TV news where you just have to be willing to say, okay, took a left turn here, and this is more compelling than that was. And so let's go with it.
Your career is very unique in that you started at NBC 7 as an intern, you went to Bakersfield, and now you're right back where it all began. Most of the time, people go bouncing around to a whole bunch of different markets. Tell us about returning to San Diego, because you've now been there for over 20 years now.
Yeah, it's great. I think I didn't know what I had when I went to San Diego State. I left and went to Bakersfield, and Bakersfield has wonderful people, but that's about it. The air quality is horrible. It was a stepping stone for me. I didn't have any family or friends or roots there, and I'll say this again: like, the people of Bakersfield were amazing. It was awesome, but it was hot. And there wasn't a lot going on. And so the chance to come back to San Diego with my then wife, because we got married while we were in Bakersfield, we had met in San Diego. It was great for the two of us. And it felt great to, I was able to appreciate it when I came back, for sure. And now I think I mentioned that, got, raised 3 kids here. And so this is home. And we've been truly lucky to be in a place like this for so long in this industry, where people do bounce around, like you mentioned, and have to take several stops along the way. And so, the flip side is I had to kind of grow here, and was fortunate enough that was able to happen too. So
let's talk about just the culture of working on a morning show. You mentioned earlier about the producers who have much worse hours than you. Give us, when do you usually go to bed? When do you usually wake up? When do you usually arrive in the studio? When do you usually get home and sleep?
Well, last night I went to bed later than I normally do, because I'm a Niners fan. And so I was watching the game a couple nights ago, because now this is airing on a Wednesday, I believe. But, oh man, I try to go to bed by 8, I would say. And I'm usually waking up around 2:30 to 3 o'clock in the morning. It's that's the biggest struggle. What's interesting is people, whenever I say that I wake up between 2:30 and 3 in the morning, they always have the same reaction, which is like, oh gosh, it's actually not that bad. That's not the hard part. I think the hard part is being disciplined and wanting to go to sleep, because my body gets this, like, I'm exhausted in the middle of the day after I get off a lot of times. And then you get this, like, little burst of energy at night. My wife will come home from work, maybe there's stuff going on, and you kind of want to be part of that. And it's like, nope, you gotta shut it down.
I wanted to ask you about being a leader in the newsroom as someone who's on the air. Look, there's a lot of different people that are involved in this, but because you're in front of the camera, you're a leader in the minds of the public. And especially, you mentioned how nervous you were with the teleprompter when you were first getting started. When somebody new comes in, and if there is a mistake on a teleprompter, tell us what your just philosophy is about being a leader in the newsroom when it comes to these different jobs behind the scenes.
Yeah, like, I'm a huge writing guy. Like, I love writing. And so one of the things I've been doing recently are writing tips for people. And some of them may seem obvious, but I'll hear from people and say, oh my gosh, that was such a good reminder. I'll hear from some of my seasoned veterans who kind of appreciate it. So that's one of the things I've done. I think it's just our general manager here at NBC 7 has started talking about this thing like a no jerk policy. I think that through the years of TV, there have certainly been these anchors and people who, throw snooze scripts or, just yell or something like that. So I certainly would never want that being tied to my reputation. We're all human. I mean, we get frustrated. And I've told the writers, I say, listen, if there's something that happens on TV and you screw up and then I screw up as a result, sometimes I'll get frustrated, but I'm actually more mad at myself for not being able to overcome that. Because if they do something and I'm able to see it and recognize it and pivot on the air live, and the viewer doesn't know anything about it, I'm fine. I just know that about myself. I don't get frustrated there. So usually I tell them, like, listen, I'm as much frustrated at myself as I am at you. I enjoy the new people that come in that want to learn, because there's some people that come in and you can kind of tell, like, hey, this is just a job, and I'm just clocking in, clocking out, if you will, and whatever. And and even though they might not say that, you kind of get that. But there's other people who they come in, they're young, and they're like, no, I kind of want to make this a career. And they're not renters. I love that. And when you talk afterwards, like, they're thirsty, like, oh yeah, tell me, because sometimes, you don't want to just assume that people want to be be mentored or whatever. But if they're asking, like, hey, will you help me? Like, will you look at these scripts or whatever? And, like, let's go over it. And then it's like, sure, let's do that, and it gives me permission to not feel like I'm this grade school teacher, putting red pen marks on scripts or things like that,
When it comes to being on air, and there's this phrase a lot about someone's just a natural on air. And I think that's someone who I know that I've not spent a lot of time on camera, but when I have, I know that sometimes I'm just trying too hard to either be serious and focused on this, or, oh no, not be so focused and just smile a ton. And I'm wondering your evolution of just feeling natural and just having like a calmness or consistency to your voice when it comes to how you deliver the news.
Yeah, for me, I don't have this deep, booming, quintessential TV news voice. Like, it's not me. And so I will go back and listen to voice tracks that I did 15 years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so throaty and nasally, And so there's that kind of stuff. But I think for me, I think the word is authentic. And I think I've always wanted to be authentic with who I am and authentic with the viewer, and not try to be somebody on TV that I'm not in real life. And I did have to sort of cultivate this idea of being 110% of yourself on TV sometimes with the energy, because I tend to be a laid back person in general. And I think that was maybe a hindrance from the other side of the camera, that some people said, hey, listen, like, we need more energy. And so that was working within that to still be myself, but be like, an exaggerated version of myself when it requires.
All right, we're going to wrap things up here, but I want to hit on a couple more topics briefly. One is covering fires, because there's been a bunch of fires in Southern California, all over California, really. And to me, fire coverage, it's dangerous. If you're out in the field, it is frightening for people. You're trying to figure out, when do I evacuate? Give us some of your biggest, just kind of like takeaways about the intensity involved when there's a huge fire that's going on and you're covering that.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because this is the 20th anniversary of the Cedar Fire here. Biggest fire that at the time in California history. And I think for people that were living in San Diego 20 years ago and went through that, it was scarring, and people died. There was the wind speed that was intense. No one ever thought you'd see a fire jump I-15 and have fire officials worried that it may burn to the coast and burn through La Jolla. I mean, all this stuff was very, very real. And so, I think for me, because I'm also like, there's this thing about homeowners that's like, oh, like, I'll wait till the very last minute, because I don't want to leave my house. Nobody wants to leave their house. I want to defend my house. You say that too. But I think the scary thing is when you're covering these fires, when they're super intense and the wind is going, is that you forget like how far the wind is throwing the embers all over the place. And so it's not this wall of fire that's marching from the backcountry west. It's throwing embers, and the wind and the different canyons is taking it in different places. And then there's this problem of you're not in control of what thousands of your neighbors are doing at the same time too, and bottlenecking on these streets that aren't meant to have that many cars on them at the same time. And so when you hear about the stories of people dying in fires, it's a lot of time in their cars. And so like they did get out mostly, but they didn't get all the way out because they waited too long. And so that's frightening for me. And so there's a, just in terms of coverage, like we're not firefighters, like, we're reporters. And so there'd be nothing more stupid than for us to go put ourselves in a position on the front lines that's not only going to endanger ourselves, but maybe endanger firefighters who have to come rescue us because we're being dumb. So, I like, there's no part of me that needs to like be the hero, cool guy looking on TV with the fire burning like right behind me. But like on the flip side, if it's safe, if we can do it, like I'm all about bringing the viewer right to the thing that they're worried about. And there's nothing in San Diego that gets people more interested in TV news coverage than a large fire. I mean, that's when we're at our best in providing the public real-time, real information, stuff that can't be done on the national level, stuff you can't figure out or see in a online article, and social media posts only go so far. And so I think that's one of the most important things we do is covering fires live, real time, getting people the information and trying to do it in a safe manner.
And in those moments, how would you describe just the intensity in the newsroom, or just the focus maybe might be the better room in the newsroom about we have to get this right, and where everyone is just completely locked in and this is our time to be at our best?
Yeah, I think you said it there. I mean, like those are the moments where you want to be in a newsroom. Like this is why you get into the business, the big news stories. And nobody wants that to happen. Like you don't want there to be a fire. You don't want there to be some other awful thing. But when it happens, there's nothing that's sort of wakes you up and is more satisfying and invigorating as a journalist than being able to cover live news. And I love it. I love being out there. I love talking to people and just covering all of it. It's a fun, and our news director, Greg Dawson, who's, been in this market forever and is just really one of the smartest news minds that I've ever come across. He was recently trying to get this across to like a younger generation who's like, maybe it's a Saturday or Sunday and they're not answering their phone and it's like, oh, like it's my day off, one of those things. And the balance of like, yeah, like, okay, I get that, but like, it's not like, we need you. We need all hands on deck during these big events, but you want to be here for this. Like even if you don't know it, like you do, you want to be part of these big events because this is why we get into the business.
All right. We like to conclude this podcast by bragging about other San Diego State alums who are in various communication fields who are making us proud. You can brag about anyone who you'd like, Stephen. I have a feeling there's probably a bunch of Aztecs in your newsroom, but go ahead. The floor is yours. Brag away about Aztecs.
Oh man, so many great Aztecs. There's a ton in our newsroom, and some that have left. I mean, names like Ken Kramer and Artie Ojeda are guys that I looked up to that are proud Aztecs. And there's a guy named Garrett Ng, who's one of my good buddies here, and I have to mention his name in terms of being one of the diehard Aztec sports fans. Garrett was a SDSU alum back in the day. One of my mentors at San Diego State during the time I was part of the ambassadors program, the guys in the red shirts that walked backwards, giving tours and things like that. The official student representatives, our advisor at the time, Minharas, out of the School of Communications, now is grant writing for nonprofits. And Mike's just a wonderful human being along with his wife, Marietta. And so the list goes on, man. SDSU was such a pivotal place for me. And I love running into my fellow Aztecs and, roommates and friends and classmates. It's a great spot. The picture behind you makes me want to go over to campus right now.
Yeah, I love all the different backdrops that are available on these Zoom calls. It makes me want to get on a plane and go to San Diego myself as well to see these places.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, for the alum that I'm going to brag about, he's actually been a guest on this podcast before, but it's Raj Mathai, and I feel like it's a good reminder to the people to go listen to Raj, because just like Stephen, Raj is from the Bay Area, went to San Diego State. Raj initially was in sports. Now he's in news. He is back up in the Bay Area where he grew up. He anchors, I think it's the 5, 6, and the 11. We didn't talk about your time in the Olympics, Stephen, but Raj has also been to the Olympics. So have you and Raj crossed paths at all the different Olympics that you've been with NBC?
Raj is one of my good friends in this business, and he's awesome. And so, yeah, we've got some stories, some I can tell and some I can't, about the Olympics. We were most recently together in Tokyo, and being West Coast guys, our news hits are right around the same time. So we'd see a lot of each other there. It was funny because, we've known each other since we first met covering the Olympics back in 2006 in Torino, Italy. And Raj, and then we went, I think we covered London together as well. And so we knew we were Tokyo was the last Olympics we got to. And I'm in my hotel room and and all of a sudden I hear this voice. I'm like, I know that voice. Come out. Raj is in the hotel room next to me. So our rooms are back to back. And so it was pretty funny. And that was a time where the first half of the Tokyo Olympics, we were under quarantine, couldn't really go anywhere other than to these approved Olympic venues and our workspace and things like that. And then the second half, we were able to get out and about and go explore. So Raj and I had some fun in Tokyo together for sure.
I always think it's fascinating when you meet someone who's in the same field as you and you don't know who they are, and you have however long you know them. And then at a certain point you realize, wait, we both went to San Diego State at the same time. And it just like opens up this flood of memories. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. That's why you talk about fish tacos, or that makes sense, once you start going back to these conversations that you've had because you were both Aztecs.
Oh man, no, it's great. Raj actually interned at NBC7 here in San Diego in the sports department.
The connections never end. Yes, absolutely. All right, Stephen, thank you for being so generous with your time, especially right after you finished your morning show. I enjoyed it. I know our students really enjoyed this as well, and keep making us proud.
Hey, Josh, thanks so much for the invite. Great talking to you.
Once again, that is Stephen Luke. He has won 15 Emmys. What a proud alum. My name is Josh Sushan. I am your host of the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person, or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.